Oh, bro. Like, oh, what else can you do but laugh at this point? Honestly, it's just the Leafs have lost another game seven against the Boston Bruins. I just want to read a quick tweet from Chris Johnson here. The Leafs have held a third period lead in 3 of the 4 game seven losses against the Boston Bruins since 2013. That's nice, isn't it? Isn't that just a tweet that just brightens up your day if you're a Leaf fan? It sure does. It sure does. Also, on top of that as well, I should mention that the Leafs in the past 8 years have only made it out of the first round once. And the last 7 of the 8 years, they have lost in the first round. And the only time that they made it past, they beat the Tampa Bay Lightning last year, of course, but then proceeded to lose to the Florida Panthers and get absolutely smoked in 5 games. I honestly don't even know what to say at this point because we're going to be talking about the exact same things we do every single year, where the Leafs score 4 wasn't good enough, the Leafs power play wasn't good enough, and the Leafs penalty kill wasn't good enough. It's the same thing we talk about every single year, but it's what kind of causes issues with them in the playoffs. Like specifically with this series here, it was a very winnable series for the Leafs. I don't think the Bruins played that well. Like they were good in certain instances. They were very good at stopping the Leafs at the blue line, especially on the penalty kill. They did a really good job clogging up the front of the net. But honestly, outside of that, like I don't think they were a unbeatable team. I feel like this is a team that the Leafs really could have beat if they were up to their standard. And I don't know if they really fully were throughout these entire playoffs. Once again, it's another narrative coming out of these playoffs. The Leafs only scored more than 3 goals once out of these 7 games, and that was against Linus Ullmark. Jeremy Swayman only allowed 2 or less goals in this series, so the Leafs have only scored more than 3 goals once out of their last, 13 or 14 playoff games? They just cannot seem to score in the playoffs for whatever reason. Now, like I mentioned, the Bruins did do a very good job clogging up the front of the net, and when they did make that little mistake, Swayman was there. Swayman was fantastic in the series. He really, really was. He was a huge reason why the Bruins won this series, and on the other side, Ilya Samsonov wasn't really quite up to par. I mean, at least through those first 4 games, he just wasn't really quite the Ilya Samsonov that we saw in last year's playoffs, and with Game 7, I did think that he played quite well. He didn't really have to make any phenomenal stops, and that OT winner there, that was not his fault at all. You can maybe blame him a little bit with the Lindholm goal, but that OT winner, not his fault. That was a very good set play by the Bruins, and Pastrnak kind of completed on it. One thing I do want to say as well is I was very nervous talking about Pastrnak coming into Game 7. There was a lot of discussion around him, how he really did not show up in these playoffs, or at least in this first round, and of course, he ends up scoring the OT winner. I was nervous about that, and of course, he does end up scoring that goal, so I guess I kind of had a feeling about that, and it's just so heartbreaking that Joseph Woll was not able to play in Game 7, because it at least seems like he was hurt on that final shot in Game 6, where the Bruins scored a goal with 0.1 seconds left to go. If that is the case, if that is actually how he got hurt, it's just, oh man, it just really feels like the Leafs are cursed, because Joseph Woll was playing so well. I understand why Sheldon Keefe did not go to him in, the first couple of games of the series, because coming into the playoffs, he really was not playing all that well, but he was fantastic in Game 5 and Game 6, and the third period of Game 4 as well, and it's just so unfortunate that he was not able to play for Game 7, but it really does just come down to the offense, where the Leafs can't seem to score any goals at all. With the power play, they went 1 for 21 in this series. They scored 1 goal out of 21 power play opportunities. That is completely unacceptable. That is like below 5% on the power play. It is crazy that you have Austin Matthews, John Tavares, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, Morgan Riley, Bertuzzi, Domi, all of these players, and you get 1 power play goal out of 21 opportunities. I know not everybody was healthy, not everyone played every single game, but that is beyond ridiculous. Their penalty kill wasn't very good either. They went 6 for 17, so it's not like you can really blame the refs in the series, because the Leafs got 5 more power plays than the Bruins, and honestly, towards the end of the series, I was hoping that the Leafs weren't getting any penalties, because they were playing much better 5-on-5 than they were on the power play. It's just so funny to me how almost every single year at the start of the season, their power play is clicking, their penalty kill is clicking, but as the season goes on and on and on, it just gets worse and worse, and by the time March rolls around, they are just absolutely awful on those 2 penalty kill and power play percentages, and once the playoffs show up, they are just invisible on both of those aspects. It is so funny to me, because during most of the season, the Leafs power play and penalty kill percentages are usually top of the league, or at least top 10 in the league, but yeah, they are just awful every single year in the playoffs. The only time that they had over a 20% power play percentage in the Matthews era, at least as far as I was checking, was last year against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And guess what? They won that series. So it is the power play and penalty kill that really kills them every single series, which of course does end up bringing that conversation of what did the core four do in this series? Well, Austin Matthews in 5 games played had 1 goal, 3 assists for 4 points. Now, with Austin Matthews, we know that he wasn't really at 100% for at least most of the series, maybe the entire series. He did have a very good game too, but outside of that, he wasn't really looking like his usual self, and obviously he was out for game 5, game 6, and that third period of game 4. As I'm recording this right now, I don't know what happened to Austin Matthews, so I'm not quite too sure if it was a lingering issue that happened in the regular season or exactly what went wrong there, but, he was not at his full strength. I thought he had an okay playoffs. I wouldn't really fully put this on him just because we do know that he was injured. William Nylander, though, of course, he did miss the first 3 games of the series, so he only played 4 games. He had 3 goals, no assists for 3 points, but he did have the last 3 goals for the Maple Leafs in this series. He scored 2 in game 6, 1 in this game, and that was all the Leafs goals that they got in the last 2 games. So I do feel like, once again, William Nylander did show up in the series. He was, maybe not quite there in the first couple of games, but he was kind of getting his legs back under him. It's another time where I do think Nylander did kind of show up in these playoffs. I wouldn't really put them on him. John Tavares in 7 games played only had 1 goal, 1 assist for 2 points. We know that at this point in his career, John Tavares is not worth $11 million. It's, kind of what we expected when we signed that contract, of course. I do think that he did have a pretty good series, though. He was forechecking really hard. He was in those battles. He was winning puck battles a lot, I would say. He did set up Matthew Knies for the game winner in game 5, it was, I believe. And I'm pretty sure John Tavares scored the only power play goal for the Leafs in the series as well, if I'm not mistaken. I feel like Tavares had a pretty good series. I feel like he does kind of show up in those bigger moments, I would say. But of course, he's not worth $11 million. He's just straight up not at this point in his career. So, obviously spending $11 million on him does really hurt your team a lot. But I do think that he was still not horrible in this series. But maybe, I could understand why people will say he was not good enough, because if you're spending $11 million on your second line center, you would want him to have more than 2 points. That is for sure. So I definitely understand that point of view. But of course, now we get to the player that everybody is going to be talking about, and that is Mitch Marner, who had 1 goal, 2 assists for 3 points in 7 games in the series. He just wasn't good enough. Once again, I feel bad for Mitch Marner, because I really do think that he wants to win with his team. He wants to be with his team. He is a hometown kid. I really do feel like he wants to win with the Maple Leafs. And I also don't think that he was 100% in the series either. Just watching Mitch Marner, I wouldn't say that he was really as nervous as he was in previous years, but I just don't really think that he had that foot speed, that, kind of edges that he usually does, where he can kind of spin around guys, make that really nice pass. And I think that mostly has to do with him hurting his ankle back in that game with the Boston Bruins in the regular season. And it's so unfortunate, because with that game, he had that open net, he was able to shoot it, and he didn't do that. He went around the net, tried to do a spin around shot, and that is where he hurt his ankle. It is just so unfortunate that is kind of what ruined his season, I would say. He was out for a lot of games, and once he came back, he really just did not seem like the same player. And like I said, obviously Mitch Marner has been criticized a lot for his play in the playoffs in previous years. I feel like this year is slightly different, but now we're coming back to the same question that we're going to be talking about with the core four every single year is, who do you trade? Can you even trade anyone? Because next year is really going to hurt the Leafs. The Austin Matthews and William Nylander contracts kick in both next season. So Matthews is now going to be making $13.25 million a year. William Nylander, $11.5. John Tavares, $11 million. And Mitch Marner, $10.9. So the conversation of if the Leafs can win with all their top guys making so much money gets even worse next year, as they're making an extra $6.25 million. So that is basically a Bertuzzi and someone else coming out of your lineup for nothing new. You're still getting the top 4 guys. I personally just really do not see it happening. I really don't know what they do with this roster here. Obviously, I really do feel like Brendan Shanahan and Sheldon Keefe are going to be gone. Also, I forget their power play coach right now, but he's also obviously gone as well. There's no way they're bringing him back. He's going to be fired. But even with this core 4 here, I want to say, okay, one of them has to be gone as well. Most likely Mitch Marner. But the problem is, all of these guys now have no movement clauses, so you can't do anything. If you were going to do anything, it was probably going to be last season, and it looked like Kyle Dubas was planning on trading out most likely Mitch Marner. It sounded like that was the direction he was going to go in, but of course, he was fired, he was let go, and then they bring in Brad Treliving, where he only has a month to decide what to do with this team. I'm assuming he probably wasn't giving the good to go to trade one of the core four guys. He was probably asked to do, basically just little changes around the lineup, which I honestly think he did a fairly good job. This team, I will say, is a lot tougher than Leaf teams in years past. The one thing that you can't really say about this Leafs team is that they were soft. They really are not. They brought in guys like Benoit and, Edmondson, and McCabe, obviously, was coming in from Kyle Dubas, but he was still very physical in this series. Ryan Reeves, they were a very physical team. They were, hitting a lot. They were probably one of the more physical teams, I would say, in the first round, but that didn't really matter a whole lot. And as for guys that Treliving got, let's talk about Domi and Bertuzzi, because I feel like those were really the big names in this offseason. We were really expecting both of them to step up during playoff time. I do think Domi did a pretty good job this playoff season. I don't think he was phenomenal or anything like that, but he did really step up when Matthews went down. He was fantastic on the draw. He did end up with 1 goal, 3 assists for 4 points. With Tyler Bertuzzi, he did end up with the exact same stat line of 1 goal, 3 assists for 4 points, but I have a different point of view on Tyler Bertuzzi than I do Max Domi. I would love if Max Domi re-signed with the Maple Leafs. I'd be totally down with that. As for Bertuzzi, please, for the love of God, let this man walk. I cannot stand this player whatsoever. He has hands of stone. I really don't understand how he hit 20 goals this season, because he had 1,000 opportunities to put the puck in, and he just never did it. And he had so many opportunities in the series to put the puck in, and it somehow just always ended up in his feet, him falling down, him not putting the puck in. I am so frustrated with that player. I do not ever want to see him on my team ever again. I know some Leaf fans like Tyler Bertuzzi and want him back. I do not whatsoever. I hope that he just walks, because, man, I do not like that player at all. But yeah, going back to the core four, sorry, I think I got a little bit distracted. Like I said, this is partially a rant, so I really don't know, kind of how I'm structuring this. But, like I said, I think Shanahan is gone. Sheldon Keefe is gone. As for any of the core players, Austin Matthews, you're obviously keeping. I mean, first of all, he is definitely the best player on this team right now. He is one of the best Leafs players of all time. Probably even the best. I mean, at least in my opinion, I do think that he is the greatest Leaf of all time. William Nylander, you did also just sign him. I think he shows up in the playoffs. I do think you keep him. With John Tavares, that would be such a hard contract to move. I know it is only 1 year left at $11 million, so you could retain on that if you really wanted to, but I feel like that is kind of a tough sell for John Tavares. He is the captain of the team. He has 1 year left on his deal. He is in his hometown. He has his family all here. I really don't think that he would want to move. I don't think that he would waive his no movement clause, so I don't think you're trading him. If anything, you're probably having John Tavares, kind of pass off that captaincy to Austin Matthews next year. I would really like to see that, but of course, comes down to Mitch Marner again. We've talked about him year after year after year, talking about trading him. I know a lot of people really think that this is the year he is going to be traded. I don't know. I don't think that you can, because once again, he has a no movement clause. He has to waive that. And for me, with Mitch Marner, does he want to do that? Does he really want to waive his no movement clause? He's going to end his time with the Maple Leafs kind of being a little bit of a villain. Most people, at this point, a lot of Leaf fans are really not a huge fan of Mitch Marner, and I don't think that he wants to leave his Leaf career in that aspect. I think he wants to kind of, change the storyline there and step up and really become, at least a little bit of a folk hero maybe in his last year. I just really can't see him waiving his no movement clause in that aspect, especially because this is his hometown team, the team that he grew up loving, cheering for, everything like that. And even if he does end up waiving his no movement clause, even if he does say, okay, you guys can trade me, that is going to be a really difficult trade for Treliving to make, because teams know, okay, this guy waived his no movement clause. He probably only has a limited amount of teams that he really wants to go to. So now they have the upper hand. It's going to be a tough negotiation. I really don't think the Leafs, win that trade. It's not like Mitch Marner is a bad player, because he's really not. So, I think trading him just regularly, it would be a tough trade to kind of, even out on, or even come out in the positive. So the fact that he has that no movement clause, he has all of the power in the situation, I feel like that is going to be a very tough trade to make if you are Brad Treliving. But on top of that as well, if you hold on to him for this year, going into next season, he's a UFA, so he can go wherever he wants. And I don't know what they do. I honestly do not know what they do with Mitch Marner because I feel like every single situation is kind of a lose-lose. I just really don't see them winning any situation with Mitch Marner, whether you keep him and then he walks in a year, whether you keep him and then sign him again, whether you trade him in the offseason. I just don't see any situation where you really win with this player. It's so unfortunate because I do think that he is a special player. I do think that he is very good. And if he does end up going to another team, I think that he could have a very good playoffs with that team. But as a Maple Leaf with this core four, I just can't really see it. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's mental. I don't know what's going on, but it just really does feel like this core four can't stick together. But I also don't see how they trade any of them this offseason. If they were going to do it, it had to have been in years past, and they just kept going at it, shoving their head against the wall, banging it against the wall, trying to make it work, and it never did. Well, it did once, except for they lost in 5 games the next round, and they got absolutely smoked in those 5 games. So it didn't really even work then, even though it kind of did. I don't know, man. I just really don't know what you do with this team. I do think Samsonov is also leaving this offseason. I don't think that he re-signs with the Leafs. I don't think the Leafs really want to re-sign him. You probably go with Joseph Woll, and, you're looking for maybe a 1A, 1B sort of type of situation there. I do think Joseph Woll is a very good goaltender. I don't know if I want to throw him to the Wolves next season and have him be the full-time starter, playing like 60 games, 50 games, something like that. I would want it maybe closer to a, 50-50 split. Kind of warm up into that starter position. I think that would be a little bit better for him because I think he's only played like 37 games in his career. So yeah, it would be a little bit better, I think, for him to kind of warm up into that situation. I don't know who the Leafs would get for that 1A, 1B type situation, but as of right now, at least in my opinion, I think that is the way to go. But yeah, outside of that, they just really don't have a ton of cap space to tinker with the bottom of their lineup there. So I feel like, it might be difficult for the Leafs to actually make the playoffs next year. I could see that happening. I mean, I guess we'll see exactly what they do over the summer here, and maybe that will change my mind. But, I really could see them being a wild card team just because I really don't see them having a ton of depth. I do think Robertson will step up next year, kind of be a full-time player. Matthew Knies, obviously, has been pretty good. I really do like Matthew Knies. I think he is a very good player. He's pretty clutch in a lot of games, so I like him as well. But maybe Fraser Minton will step up and kind of become a full-time Leaf. But, you're kind of hoping, at least with some of those players at that point. So it's going to be tough. I do think next season is going to be very, very tough. This offseason, you got to make a lot of key choices, and we'll see kind of what plays out. I really do not know, but yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, to be fair, I did expect the Boston Bruins to win this series in 7. That is what I predicted. That's what, I saw that if the Leafs were going to Game 7, the Bruins would take it. So I did expect that, but it's hard. This is another, I feel like this is probably one of the more difficult off seasons, more because of the fact that I just don't really know what they can do at this point. I feel like, with a lot of the other offseason, or at least a lot of the other times when they lost in the first round, immediately after, I kind of tricked myself into believing, okay, they could trade this player, they could do this, they could trade one of their core 4 guys. Right now, I don't really see that. I don't know. I feel like they're kind of stuck with this lineup once again next year, and they're going to go back towards it again next year. I'm just really not excited for it, to be honest. So yeah, I don't know. Anyways, that's going to do it for me. I don't know how coherent this video really is, to be honest. Like I said, I kind of rambled a little bit, but that is going to do it for me. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'm expecting probably a lot of other teams fans to come into this video, probably talk shit in the comments. That is completely fine. I expect that. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys are here and you're new, make sure to subscribe. I would really appreciate it. I do talk about jerseys most of the time, so, if you are into jerseys, make sure to, check out my other videos, but, and follow me on my social medias as well. That is it for me, though. Thank you so much for watching. And once again, Leafs are out in the first round. See you later. Adios.